Stay tuned to the end of this video to a word for our patrons. Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Take FGO Wanted, the show where we let you know if you want to roll that 5-star. Been a while, huh? Since Valentine's Day. Well, I could use a tropical island vacation because my allergies are destroying me, but alas, I am here instead. So, it's time to rebel against the concept of linear time and talk about the Trung sisters, a new SSR Saber unit. We'll talk history, mechanics, lore, and more on today's Wanted if you haven't gotten into the episode before. And also, hey, the video's a little late. I've got a few notes in the script where I talk about that, but yeah, in case you can't tell from the allergy joke, even while I'm recording this, I don't feel great, and there may be some awkward edits as I have to cough because my lungs hurt. But we'll get through. Trust me. Okay, so this involves Vietnamese history. My pronunciation of that language has never been great. I'll try, but I apologize in advance if I screw anything up. I almost said a bad word, and I know we're only like 50 seconds into the video. I'll hold that off. We'll let the cusses come out naturally in the script. But yes, my phenomes are not going to be the best, especially also because I'm dying. Sorry. Mub. Anyway, we're talking about the Trung sisters known as Hai Ba. Actually, no, it'd be a falling vowel, but I can't do that right now. Trung in Vietnam roughly translates to, well, maybe it's fairly literally translates, again, I'm not sure, two ladies named Trung. The funny part is when researching this, also, you go through Vietnamese to Chinese historical pronunciations to Japanese pronunciations of historical Chinese pronunciations. It's very funny, but we're going to say Trung as correctly as we can. There's a little diphthong on the U, and I have absolutely no idea how to do that, so we're going with it. Anyway, the sisters Trung were rebel leaders and later rulers of Vietnam during the period where most of the northern Vietnam was under occupation by the Han Dynasty China, and they are considered national heroes of Vietnam. Also, hey, this was a long, long time ago. This was like 2,000 years ago, just in case you want to talk about scale. But Vietnam has a pretty long history of being aggressed against by the Chinese. Former Qin general Zhao Tuo founded the state of Nan Yue in about 204 BCE and incorporated the Vietnamese kingdom of Ao Lac in about 180 BCE. So already, pretty historical there. The name Vietnam even comes from the Vietnamese reading of Nan Yue, Nam Viet, though modern historians do not count Nan Yue as a legitimate Vietnamese state. They were formed by an outside nation, but it is an interesting historical thing to mention. Anyway, in 111 BCE, the Han Dynasty first took notice of these guys to their south and conquered Nan Yue, beginning the first era of northern domination. We'll just let that one sink in for a second. Anyway, much after this, enter the sisters Trung. Trung Trak and Trung Ni. It's N-H-I. Again, not sure if I'm pronouncing the funny symbols on these vowels correctly. They probably should have taught me that in school instead of how to write in cursive. Anyway, they were born in Jiaoji at some point. I say some point because the dates are unknown. We don't have their birth records. The dates we know for sure are in the, technically 30s to 40s AD, so very long time ago. We do know that they were born to a wealthy and aristocratic family from the local Lac peoples. We know that Trung Trak was the older sister, and both sisters were said to be highly educated and could have inherited their father's position. He was administrator of a local region of a section of the province. And according to what historical sources we have before the Nan Yue times, the Ao Lac people seemed to practice matrilinearity or matrilicality. You would move close to your wife's family and stay with them, and women could inherit through the mother's line and stuff like that. So there were customs that favored women. This will be important later. Anyway, Trung Trak was actually married to a man named Thi Sach, or is it Sach? I don't actually know. How do you do the CH in this? I'll try and stop mentioning how I don't know the syllables. But he was also a local lord of an administrative district, and he was said to be pretty bold himself, and he had conflict with Su Ding, the local Chinese administrator. No, his name was indeed Su Ding. Anyway, Su Ding sucked. He was noted historically for his tyrannical behavior and cruel ways. Even his fellows later would be like, yeah, that guy sucked. He attempted to restrain Thisach with laws and even attempted to behead him without trial. Now, how exactly the rebellion started is open to some debate. I literally heard it both ways. Some sources claim that Trung Trak rose up in revenge for her husband. He was actually executed, but other sources think that historically it may have occurred due to the administrative policies of the Han and cessation. These were changing inheritance laws to stop favoring women as much and would have affected her own, land and inheritance there. Either way, cultural oppression. Regardless of how it actually got started, what the exact reasoning was, in 40 CE, Trung rose up with her sister, Trung and rallied lots of the local lords to fight back against the Han. It started primarily in the Red River Delta, but basically spread to everywhere in the northern Vietnam region. The Trung Rebellion is reported to have captured upwards of 65 towns and strongholds, and Su Ting was forced to flee. They came together, got everybody to rally, and started pushing out. After pushing out the governor, Trung was actually crowned Queen Trung of Vietnam, fully Queen Regent. Depending on the exact historical source we're looking at, Trung Nhi's role is only mentioned in some of the text, but she was said to have either served as the co-regent or viceroy, so either fully two queens thing or just, first assistant to queen. Still, very important. But as you can expect from it being called the first era of northern domination, this didn't last. The Han rustled up an army of about 20,000 regulars and 12,000 auxiliaries. Yes, that's a lot of men. Chinese wars involve lots of men. And they began a campaign in the year 42. It ended in the year 43, with Trung forces being pushed back to their strongholds in the jungles and mountains and ultimately defeated. This is where we do get some differences between Chinese and Vietnamese histories. The Chinese sources say that the sisters were captured and executed. Their heads were sent back to the capital. But there are some Vietnamese sources that say they committed suicide by jumping into a river rather than face capture. This is mentioned that both possibilities exist in their FGO profiles, so we are mentioning it here. I don't want to say that both sources aren't biased in their own ways, but there is a reason why I think both sources would prefer their version. Also, the Vietnamese sources, at least the ones that, are supposed to be start at Wikipedia and then drill down into where they get their sources and so on. That is how you're supposed to use encyclopedias, by the way. You look at them as your high-level source and then okay, where did this get this idea? The named Vietnamese histories I can find do seem to favor Theosakis having been executed. Chinese sources claim that he was still alive and fled and was captured later after the queens had fallen. Again, we're talking about something that's 2,000 years old, and both versions have their reason to claim these things, so I shrug my shoulders in that general direction. Just want to let you know, these are the general historical vibes. We have some competing schools of thought, as we say. Anyway, regardless of the exact facts, the Trung sisters are very important figures in Vietnamese nationalism. Temples to them have existed since at least the 1100s, and possibly even earlier, and there is a district in modern Hanoi named after them. Very important, very oftenly depicted. The sisters are often depicted riding war elephants. You can even see that in the bed image I've selected for this video. I don't actually see any exact accounts where that was said to be a thing that they did, but it's a very common art motif. There were some exhortations from the Chinese histories that did mention that they retreated deep into the jungle where there were, rhinoceroses and elephants and stuff. I didn't actually see any exact quotes about war elephantry. That just could have been a thing. So that means it's time to talk about lore, which will be short. First, design note, Trung sisters are drawn by Take, who does character designs and concept art for the Pokemon franchise, seemingly starting with Sun and Moon. Take did both of the servants for this event, actually. But if you're like, hey, these kind of look like Pokemon characters, you're not wrong. So, Trung is the red one. She's supposed to have a calm, motherly, yet righteous personality. Though it does say that since their historical ages are ambiguous, they are drawn vaguely young, because anime art. But behind closed doors, Trung is supposed to be, super stressed and wants to just relaxed. Trung Nhi is the blue one. She's cool and professional, but in private is a bit of a siscon. Perfectly normal character dynamics. The things on their heads are supposed to be baby elephants. They don't actually know where they came from, but they're there. This might actually go to that note where I don't actually know if the Trung sisters were supposed to use war elephants. It's just an art motif they have. So, yeah. Now, as servants, they do seem to have some powers associated with water and rain, because they have been, enshrined in temples and even worshipped or reported as deities in Vietnam. In particular, there's an anecdote where their most famous temple was built after a drought. The current king, Vietnam was independent at this point, I believe, but he received a dream of the two sisters riding an iron horse and offered them prayers and sacrifices, and then it rained the following day, which allegedly saved the kingdom. So, very classic folkloric stuff. Also, according to a Famitsu interview given at the year, Nasu thinks the Trung sisters are the most interesting servants of the 7th year. That probably says something, both good and bad. But it's very interesting to hear him say that because this is where the lore segment ends. I don't have anything to add here. There's no particular, like, deep-cut fate twist other than that these gals are major characters in the Water Crisis event, which hasn't started by the time I wrote this script, but obviously has started by the time I'm recording it now, and will be posting it because I was too pollened up to record it before the event goes live. I literally am about to pause to cough. So this means it's time to move on to mechanics then. Alright, the Sisters Trung are a limited SSR Saber unit. They've got a kind of similar spread to the Dioscuri. They're higher HP, lower attack comparatively, though their stats aren't a 1-for-1. To break the obvious comparison with the Dioscuri, they are quick arts, buster, so going for a different hybrid here. And they have slightly above average hits, and so slightly lower NP gain. You know, it's 0.4 something for their arts cards, well, in general, but they have 4-8 arts cards, so it kind of balances out. And also, their NP is a single target arts, and while it is 9 hits, which does make the NP levels actually pretty good, it is still honestly more of a supportive one. It gives the team 1k HP per turn for 3, and then also gives the party 3 turns of arts and buster up based on overcharge. Starts at only 10%, which is a little lackluster for an NP effect, but does stack up to like 30 or 40%. Yeah, like I said, I use the phrase lackluster when I ad-libbed there, but it's in my notes. This is honestly fairly lackluster for an SSR limited Saber and is begging for an NP buff. They just do normal damage. The team-wide effect doesn't take place at first, so it's not even on the first time you use it, and it's only a 1k heal for 3. Definitely could use a damage multiplier and probably increasing the amount of healing, or, I don't know, do something actually more relevant. But how do we hold up in the skills department? Well, first we have a charisma variant. It's sadly only 10 to 15% attack for 3, but it's also a team-wide 10 to 50% arts for 3 as well. So kind of, unfortunately, deliberately holding ourselves back a little bit, but still good buffs. Second skill gives them a further self 10 to 15% arts and buster for 3 turns, but also an on-attack buff for 3 turns where hitting with the opposite card, so if you hit arts, you buff buster. If you hit buster, you buff arts by 10% for only 1 turn. This is not super great. But it does only have a 4-turn minimum cooldown, so that does mean you're getting your multicolor buff fairly regularly. You literally, at max level, only have that part off for 1 turn. So just being 15% better at arts and buster all the time is pretty good. Third skill is a 20-30% battery for self. It's a 10 to 20% NP gain up for the party, and also a 10 to 20% crit resistance chance for the party for 3 turns. Passives are just Magic Resistance B, Riding B, so your 1 quick card's going to do pretty good, and Divinity C, so you do a little bit extra damage. Now, y'all, normally on this show, I try to stay positive, and I admit, while my positive vibes are impacted by the fact that I am terribly dying of live oaks, I do generally want to say that I feel like the Sisters have a very constrained design. There are a lot of chances where I feel like in a different unit, we'd be looking at, 10 to 20% buffs or more. And I feel like they wanted to avoid stepping on the Dioscuri's toes as a self-sufficient single-target arts saber, but also not being too spammable for Castoria memes. But that's weird because we know that Lady Avalon is coming, so, like, arts is not dead by any means. And it just feels like all of their numbers reek of, like, a part 1 servant. So I don't know if that's how long they've been in the can, right? But it feels like these are very low numbers for a servant you want people to roll for. Most of these that say 15 should be 20. And some of these that are 1 turn should definitely be like 2 or 3 turns. But anyway, here we are. Basically, the Sisters are kind of off support. They can spam their MP with some decent amounts of steroids pretty regularly. And like I mentioned before, it is 9 hits, so you will be getting a very good refund on that, even without applying the fact that you are going to be basically constantly hitting at like anywhere from, 15 to like 25, 35, maybe even 50% arts up if you get all your ducks in a row, right? Like, you have a very strong arts multiplier on this. It's just you have to be stacking multiple effects and hope that you've got all your things on at the same time. So they can spam MP pretty good, and this does mean that the team gets their damage and health extended. You're constantly applying that stackable 1k per turn for 3 turns, and also the AoE, card buffs. But their team support is somewhat reduced by their second skill being purely selfish, and the on-hit buff only lasts one turn, which encourages you to use multiple cards on the sisters. Like, not necessarily a Brave Chain because they don't have an extra buff, but, like, it almost seems like what they want you to do is, like, go, like, AANP or, like, BANP. Actually, yeah, it would be, like, ABNP. You probably want to put the Buster cards first so the NP gets the arts buff stacked. But, like, okay, cool. That means they do more damage, but that means that you're not applying those team-wide damage buffs on other units. They do have their uses, and certainly if you don't have an ST Arts Saber, they can do their job fairly competently, but as somebody who has a decent amount of ST Arts Sabers, I definitely think I would personally prefer the Gemini Twins or Saber lot in this slot. If you are going to run them back, though, I recommend playing with a Stall Arts team and just go for the grind set. You're going to do very consistent damage very regularly here. Units like Tamamo, Jean, and Castori, I mean, you can keep up hard defenses and healing coming just as the sisters spam that NP over and over again, and you will definitely grind down enemies like that. And honestly, this can be useful in some story fights where it tend to be long and drawn out with lots of HP. Like, if the game is going to force you to grind anyway, the sisters are perfectly good at that. Also, because many of their buffs are team-wide, you could mix them up with some more offensive-focused units to amp everybody's damage while also still being capable of taking down multiple high-value targets at once, or just one boss with a lot of health bars. Like, you can use 2 single-target DPSs and kind of use the sisters as one of your supports to amp your other damage dealers' damage even more, while also still being able to deal damage and healing. It's just one of those things that, like, I'm going to say these things, and there are going to be some among you who are going to be like, ew, gross, you want me to take longer in fights? And I'm like, yeah, no, not really, but sometimes fights are long, and they do have a use in the grind game. Like, I think that is an area where you can definitely say they are good at, is the grind game, because they have a lot of these stackable AoE buffs. If you are going to go for CE, I'd say Arts is your key here. They only have a 30% battery on themselves, so you can mix in Imaginary Element or a K-Scope, depending on how you want to do it. But it's super easy to get batteries in Arts, so you can splurge on something like Dive to Blue or any of the other 50% Arts CEs for added effects. Or, if you're just going to run Double Castoria, go all the way to 0 and pick out Heaven's Feel or Black Grail or their revamped CEs. Or, if you're using them for that off support, don't even bother with offense. Stick them with something team-wide, like Ideal Holy King, to just amp the whole party. Like any of those effects that can give your party-wide buffs. Maybe some of those, crit stars on appearance type CEs to give somebody some critical juice. Just a thought. The Trung Sisters are bonus servants in the Water Monster Crisis event, and that seems to be it. They are not in demand as a unit for, like, event bonuses or anything. A little sad, considering that, like I said, Nasu said they were apparently the most interesting units in Year 7. But hey, them's the breaks. So that takes us to other stuff. Now, Ascension-wise, the sisters are pretty normal and cheap. Makes you wonder if they were designed much earlier and held for an appropriate event. The only thing of note here is you got to worry about seashells. The shells are also continued at skills. They need 15 per skill, which can get pretty pricey considering they aren't actually summer units. And it does cap off with 24 silver crowns per skill as well, but otherwise, fairly manageable skill ups. Also, if you want to roll Trung Sisters, this is basically your only shot. They will get a raid up and a giant pile of other raid ups in the 8th anniversary, and we might see this again at the 9th. No guarantee. But otherwise, after Seabot Crisis, they are relegated to GSSR Lucky Bags only. Like, they have not come back as, like, any other, weird off support. So, if you genuinely are interested in this servant for whatever reason, I don't, like to give people FOMO, but part of Wanted is forewarning you. Go for it now. Now is a good time to go for it. And sadly, that is kind of it. It's a little bit of a short script for a servant who are pretty cool to include for representation, but definitely feels like they come up a bit short in the mechanics. Obviously, the reason why we talk about history and lore is that is a thing that will draw people to these characters and their designs. Some of you may just want them for their art style. But definitely, I do not feel like I have ever heard of the sisters mentioned as, like, meta contenders. So here we are. But we will just have to see how things play out in Water Monster Crisis. That event is ongoing right now, though I personally haven't started it because I've been busy recording the script today. So I'll get into it as well. Look forward to my thoughts. But yes, sorry this video is a bit late. I put if in my notes, but I'm going to do it there. But we're going to sinus blast it over here. I literally had to stop the recording a couple times to cough a lot. And I'm going to be honest, I suspect this video is not going to be very in demand anyway. But if you're happy to see it, do make some noise in the comments. I know many of you have your rolling rituals if you were rolling. Make some jazz in the comments. Make sure to tune into Let's Talk FGO, our regular podcast that'll be out sometime around when this video is out. We'll see how everything shakes up us and shinguses. But look forward to, first impressions of the event, other thoughts and stuff going on there. And we do the podcast regularly every week if you happen to stumble on this and are not a regular Let's Talk FGO listener. So check us out. Other than that, I think that's the end of stuff. So, hey, give this video a like if you liked it. Leave your comments down below, like I said, or join our Discord. You should also subscribe to get more of these as they come, because, yes, there will be more Wanted videos coming. Hopefully, I can feel less crappy and get them out in a more timely manner. And we do have a long history of other Wanteds. I know that many people are anticipating the Morgan banner in about a week. We have a Wanted on her already. You should go ahead and check that one out. But make sure you're subbed and ring the bell so you know what we're doing. And also consider joining us at Patreon and get access to episodes early, including this one. Get shoutouts, listen to us record the show live. Lots of other good stuff. Really supports us. And speaking of our patrons, I'd like to give a shout out to Admit Harp, Blackest G, Call Me Zed, Carlos, Dragon, Flight Icebird, Jeremy Vasquez, JDV9000, Just the Fake, Starlight, Legendary Boss Hunter, Liam Kessler, Region Raptor, Rise of Kenji, Rogue Rowan, Charvor, Sean Pryor, some guy named Bob, and Varian the Crow. If you like what we do, let's do more, consider supporting us on Patreon.